Today I'm going to go over all of the elements and why you'd want to choose them when building a weapon. We're not going to talk about IPS type damages, and that's because you usually can't choose them, but we're going to go over the elements, and because you usually do have control over those, and how good each of their damage bonuses are, and how good each of their procs are. So for each of them, we're going to say which of the three general categories it's in, and also give its proc a grade. So the categories are going to be for the damage bonuses only, and those are going to be objectively powerful, niche useful, and generally underwhelming. And then the proc grades are going to be A, B, C, and then after, talking about each damage type, I'm going to quickly show you like an example of it as best as I can so that you can experience it for yourself if you haven't. So this might be useful to newer players more than older players, but if you sometimes aren't sure what elemental type to put on a weapon, I think this video will help. Now, for our futzing around with these damage types, we're going to use the Axe Stiletto Prime. The reason I'm going to use this weapon is because it has very good base status chance and good rate of fire, so it's easy for us to get the status we're trying to see, and it also mostly doesn't have puncture damage, which creates a visual effect that's a little confusing. So you might see a little bit of damage over time from a slash proc every so often. Just ignore that. Not the point. Just focus on the elemental proc. So first we're going to start with the objectively powerful elements, and I'm pretty sure that you can guess which one is the first in this category. These elements are always good on any weapon. Basically the idea is that the drawbacks of these weapons' damage types or procs are not compelling reasons not to use them. It's never going to get you in trouble to... okay, whatever, you get it. Corrosive. So Corrosive is our first objectively powerful element. Corrosive is extremely strong. Corrosive has bonuses against Ancients and basic armored enemies for Grineer, and since armor is the most powerful scaling mechanic in this game, that is the most important type of enemy to have a damage bonus against. And when you fight corrupted units, you get bonus damage against Ancients, cool, as well as that armor. And the proc for Corrosive gets an A, because it is armor stripping. So when you proc Corrosive on an enemy, you reduce their armor by 25% of its current value. So that means that their armor will reduce logarithmically, with each Corrosive proc dealing less and less armor reduction. But eventually, due to rounding, you will actually remove all of the target's armor. So I'm going to show you this, just one, Corrupted Heavy Gunner, and we're going to shoot at it. I'm going to put it in a Bastille and then shoot at it, and you're going to see that its armor decays as I shoot it. So I'm going to start shooting. As you can see, there are corrosive procs going off, and its armor is decreasing. And if you watch the numbers carefully, you can see that we are doing more and more damage the longer we shoot. 220 up to 221, 222, 223, and now as you can see, this enemy's health bar has turned red. That means it has no armor. There's no armor left on this enemy, and we're doing pure, the unmodded damage of the weapon. That's why Corrosive is so good. Obviously, if this weapon had more fire rate, or more corrosive damage, you'd be doing it faster, and we also don't have multi-shot, but yeah, this can armor strip enemies really good. If you want to see the maximum power of Corrosive, I made a video on armor stripping shotguns that do an insane amount of corrosive procs all at once, and you can watch that just above as a recommended video right here. So go check that out if you want to see how corrosive procs can be really sick. But in general, Corrosive is a fantastic element, really, really good. It is the best overall element in the game, because armor is the biggest threat in the game. So next up we have Cold. Now, Cold is very strong as well. Cold is a very good single element. Cold's proc reduces the movement and fire rate of the targeted hits by 50% for 60 seconds. 6 seconds? Whoa. So it reduces their damage and it reduces their mobility, which is pretty nice, so it's like a light crowd control. That gives it a B. And Cold's damage bonus spread is pretty impressive as well. Cold does bonus damage to alloy armor, so those bombards and those tougher enemies in the Grineer, the utility dudes. And it also gets a bonus against shields, so that's one unique thing. Since Infested are the weakest faction overall, being that they're mostly melee, Cold suffers resistances against Infested, but it gets a bonus against both Corpus and Grineer, which is going to be true of another element we're going to talk about in a sec. And that makes it very strong. So it's 50% against shields, 25% against alloy armor. That's pretty good. So we're going to show the Cold proc. We don't really even have to... So see, now he's icy. and started shooting noticeably slower. That's what that looks like. There you are. Not very complicated. Next up we have Toxin. This is the other element I alluded to before that has very favorable damage bonuses due to the fact that it suffers only against infested. So this is bad against fossilized infested, and it's also bad against robots. It gets minus 25% against all robots, Grineer and Corpus robots, but it gets 25% bonus to normal armor from Grineer, which is very good, and it also gets a 50% bonus to Corpus flesh. Now the important thing here is that Toxin has a special property as a damage type, where all Toxin damage ignores shields. So if you deal Toxin damage to a unit with shields, it just doesn't damage their shields and instead damages their health directly, which is incredibly powerful because you can kill them through their huge shields. This is incredibly good against Corpus. So that's really good. Very favorable damage types. Just like Cold, you're getting a very, very good compromise of like damage against Grineer and damage against Corpus. Now the problem with Toxin, of course, is that it combines into the best combined damage type, that being Corrosive. So Cold is probably going to be used a little bit more often because Toxin combines into a bunch of good elements, whereas Cold doesn't combine into as many good elements. Toxin's proc is a damage over time effect, a poison damage over time effect. This effect stacks and does a percentage of the weapon's damage that dealt the proc, and it's really good. It doesn't pierce armor like slash procs do, but it is still really strong. It's stacking damage, it multiplies your damage in a certain sense, so it's pretty good. That gets a B for its stackable damage power. It is not as good as something like Corrosive because that just makes the unit take more damage. So as you can see, as we start shooting, there are a bunch of Toxin procs that will start going off. Now we're going to stop shooting, and you can see some bleeding, which is annoying, but those little threes are the Toxin ticks. And as you can see, they're still going, and now they've tapered out. If that damage doesn't look impressive, you got to keep in mind we're not using any mods, and this is against a level 100 heavy gunner. Like, this is not meant to make the damage look impressive, it's just so you can see it. Like, the damage can be very impressive. The last member of the objectively powerful elemental combos is Blast. Blast is excellent. So Blast is, one, it's good because it happens to be the opposite of Corrosive. You know, like if you use all 4 elements, you can get Corrosive and Blast, or Radiation and Viral, or Gas and Magnetic, and the best set is Blast and Corrosive for procs and just like overall whatever. So that's really good. That is a favorable quality that you just will have it when you pick good damage types. And then the other good thing about Blast is basically that it doesn't really have any damage modifiers. It gets 50% against fossilized, so you get bonus to ancients and stuff, and then you lose minus 25 against normal armor, which is too bad, but Corrosive is already giving you bonuses to that, so and then you get a bonus to Grineer Machinery because it's so crappy or whatever, but that doesn't really matter. The point is it doesn't really have damage modifiers, so you get very consistent and reliable damage, and that's very favorable. And the other thing that's very favorable about Blast is its effect. So Blast has the Blast effect, which is an area of effect knockdown whenever you proc it on an enemy. So this time we're going to have to do a slightly different test to show just how good that is. So this proc gets an A. It gets an A because all of the other procs get a B for being like light crowd control. This is not light crowd control. You can shoot one enemy and it knocks down every... See, there you go. Look at that. OP. That's an A. And now we are into the niche useful statuses. And I think the one that most people are looking for at this point is Gas. So we will talk about Gas first. Gas is very strong because Gas is a really good proc. Gas's damage bonuses are unfavorable, and we're going to talk about that in a second, but they're not that bad, and Gas's proc is very, very good. So that's why it's good. So Gas's proc gets an A, but Gas is a niche useful element because it doesn't really have damage bonuses that matter. So Gas does reduced damage to bare Grineer flesh and bare Corpus flesh, but again, that's not like it's really not a huge deal, like you're not fighting that super often. And then it gets massive bonus damages against light infested. Again, infested are not a threat. Like, the infested faction is generally not much of a threat, but Gas's proc gets an A, and we're going to show exactly why. Gas's effect is an AoE version of Toxin's effect. So basically, when you proc a dude with Gas, you create a Toxin cloud exploding outward from them that does Toxin damage equal to what you would have done if you did a Toxin proc, but to everything nearby. So I'm going to start shooting, and you'll see a gas proc just went off. There was that little gas cloud, and now even though I only shot this guy, these ones are taking damage too. So if I shoot here, now this one started to take damage. Alright, but unfortunately we have to take a little interim break here because gas is actually ridiculously complicated, and we might as well explain it here. So I'll try to keep this as concise as possible, but I'm going to start by just reading the wiki entry for gas damage because honestly it's not that bad. So gas damage's status effect is Poison Cloud, which is what you saw before, which applies 2 separate instances of Toxin damage, notably not gas damage, on the target and all enemies within 5 meters of the target. So when you proc gas, this is what actually happens. And again, all this damage is Toxin damage, not gas damage. And remember, Toxin damage is really good, so okay. So first of all, when you proc gas, immediately you deal damage equal to physical damage plus Toxin damage, you know, added together, divided by 2. So that's as Toxin damage. So you get a big burst of damage immediately. And then you get 9 ticks of damage over 8 seconds, each equal to 125% of the weapon's total Toxin damage. Blah. So basically, you proc Toxin on everything, and you get a burst of initial Toxin damage. And then here's more weirdness, because both instances of the gas proc include the weapon's Toxin damage, emphasizing on Toxin mods will have a greater effect than heat mods. Now what this means is that if theoretically, so here's my twin Basilisk, these things have a 100% status chance, they proc gas, we're going to use them to demonstrate some stuff. What this means is that if theoretically you could get this weapon to 100% status chance without, you know, both of these dual stat mods, so like if I took this off, if we were still at 100% status chance, the gas proc will do the same amount of damage because this is Toxin damage. We didn't actually reduce the Toxin damage, we just reduced the overall gas damage, but that just decreases how often we'll proc it. That doesn't decrease. Anyway, it's very confusing, but I hope that makes sense. Like, when you build for gas, you want to put Toxin mods in first to the extent that you can, because that is actually increasing the amount of damage you're doing, even though that's silly and overcomplicated. That's how it works, so deal with it. So, multiple instances of the effect can stack on the same target, with each instance having its own timer. That works exactly the same as Toxin procs, that's not news. Base damage mods and combo multipliers do also increase the damage of gas ticks, and if the proc occurs together with a headshot and or critical hit, the gas ticks are also multiplied by a headshot multiplier and or critical damage multiplier respectively. In the case of melee weapons, Exhibit A, another 8 times stealth damage multiplier is applied to the gas ticks if the Warframe is in a stealth state. So let's do that. So we're gonna grab my Loki, if I can find my Loki. We're going to go into stealth with these twin Basilisk, and these have 100% status chance, so we're always going to proc gas when we swing them. And we're going to fight these enemies. We're going to fight some level 115. It doesn't matter. It does an absurd amount of damage. Like, spoiler alert, it does an insane amount of damage. So we're going to go in, and we're going to slide, and you see it proc gas, and it's taking for an insane amount of damage. At like 2 spin attacks from this weapon, just 2 shot, fully armored, level 115 corrupted heavy gunners. That's messed up. That's kind of messed up, isn't it? So, okay, that's really all I wanted to show you. You just need to keep in mind how messed up gas damage is. So, yeah, basically, if you want to do max damage with gas, like, gas procs are good, but what makes them obscenely good is when you're stacking all these multipliers. So if you want to do crazy damage with gas, you want to do as many of the following as possible. Critical strike, headshot, and stealth. And stealth is the most important one, but crits are important too. And then of course, of all those things, the combo multiplier also affects the gas damage. So if you want gas damage to do insane damage, be stealthed, try to get a crit. You're probably not going to get a headshot with the melee weapon, but it's possible. And try to have the combo multiplier up, and you will do absolutely absurd damage. I mean, we didn't even have a combo multiplier at all, and this weapon, this build, was able to 2-shot 2 level 115 corrupted heavy gunners. That's messed up. So that's how good gas is. End of discussion. We're moving on. Back to our originally scheduled programming. So moving on to viral damage, the next member of the niche useful category. So viral gets bonuses against cloned flesh, like naked Grineer flesh, 75% bonus, which is really good. And the highest bonus you can get against naked Grineer flesh, and then a 50% bonus against corpus flesh. And it does not have any resistances against armor or shields. The only resistances it suffers are to light infested and to Grineer machinery. So basically no resistances. It's also a very well-rounded damage type, so that's really solid. And its proc is excellent, also excellent. So viral reduces the maximum and current health of your target by 50% for 6 seconds. So what this means basically is if you can get exactly one viral proc, that will basically half kill anything that it hits. And doing more viral procs doesn't do anything except refresh the duration. Viral procs are good, you don't want lots of them, you just want one, and then suddenly you're doing a ton of damage. This is really hard to demonstrate because the enemy just has like less current and max health, so it doesn't look like anything has changed, but I'll show you like what it looks like. So yeah, viral's really good. The thing holding viral back as a damage type is basically that, there we go, viral proc, so you can see there's that little virus symbol, but nothing visibly has changed. You just have to know that this enemy has half as much health as it did before. So the thing holding viral back as a proc is, it is very good, and there's something specific it's really good for, which is why it's niche useful. But the thing holding it back is that corrosive is better and is built with one of the two elements. I'm serious, that actually is like a big detriment to viral. So corrosive and viral are both anti-scaling elements, but corrosive increases the amount of damage you are doing by much more than viral does. So when you do a viral proc, you're having their health, so if you want to, you can think of it as you get like double damage for 6 seconds. That's not exactly how it works, but if you want to think of it that way. But removing armor gives you way more than double damage, like a lot more than double damage, and I'll demonstrate that quick. So this is my normal Axolotl Prime build. This is what I actually use on this weapon, and it's basically built for corrosive procs, and I've got some heat damage for a little light crowd control. We'll talk about heat in a sec. And I'm going to fire this at the level 100 heavy gunner we were just fighting, and I want you to note the time to kill, and then I'm going to make a build that has the same amount of damage mods, but I'm going to pick an elemental combo that's not good against heavy gunners and doesn't have armor stripping, that's just like neutral, and then we're going to do it again, and you're going to see that the time to kill is way more than twice as long. Like we won't be able to kill it. Just kind of go. So we're shooting. Lots of damage, it's on fire, taking more and more damage, and it's dead. So, like less than 2 magazines, and a reasonably timely amount of time. I mean, that's a level 100 enemy, but not bad, right? So now we're going to change it. What we're going to change it to is, well, viral damage. So now we have viral and heat. Otherwise it's the same, damage numbers are exactly the same, status chance is the same, everything is the same, we just have viral instead of corrosive. And I'm going to show you that it's probably going to do okay, but not nearly as good. So that's 1 magazine. As you can see, we have viral procced, 2 magazines, and 3 magazines. We will never kill this enemy. Like, I know it's depressing, but it may very well be true that we will run out of ammo in this gun before we kill that enemy. And this is a very good weapon. Like, you can't make the argument that we just need something stronger. Like, this weapon is very strong, but that enemy just has way too much armor. So again, let me just be clear, it's not that viral is bad, it's very good, but it is worse than corrosive against the applicable enemies, those armored Grineer units, and it's a lot worse than corrosive. It's a very good damage type, and there's something it's specifically very strong for, and that is killing unarmored enemies. So if you have a way to totally remove armor, I'm gonna swap to my Ash Prime here, who has Seeking Shuriken, and I have some power strength on this, so when I throw a shuriken at a dude, they will just have no armor. I'm going to take my Soma Prime, which I've modded for viral and heat damage, like so. So as you can see, we've got viral and heat, those are only 2 types, and heat also gets bonuses against flesh, that'll be our next element to talk about. So we got viral and heat damage, and we're going to totally remove the armor of the enemy and then shoot them, and it will do excellent damage. Really, really the highest damage of any possible elemental combo, because we have slash, viral, and heat. So as you can see, we're doing phenomenal damage, absolutely outstanding damage, after we had removed the enemy's armor with his Seeking Shuriken. So the thing that viral damage is the best for, viral procs are just generally very good, very high value, if you can get them without sacrificing corrosive. But the thing that viral is so standout strong for is if the enemies already won't have any armor, or you have like a reliable other way to get rid of their armor, then viral is the best damage type in the game for damaging raw, unarmored Grineer flesh. So that's what it's good for. And now we're going to talk about heat. So heat is the third of the niche useful elements, and it's basically gonna be the same shtick as viral as far as the damage bonuses go. So heat is nice, it does good damage to unarmored flesh of things, and it's also got the nice perk that it's good against light infested. It does not get a bonus against corpus flesh, and it also suffers against corpus proto shields, but having a bonus against Grineer flesh and light infested is pretty nice. So it's fine. Also another element that doesn't have a lot of like standout important weaknesses or strengths, but the proc is also pretty good. So heat's proc is the target catches on fire. And that might sound kind of awesome, and it is kind of awesome. Basically, they will be stunned and sort of flail in fiery on-firedness, as you can see, for a brief period of time, and then they also take a percentage of the source's base damage as damage over time, so kind of like slash procs and toxin procs. Now the difference here is that slash procs stack and ignore armor, toxin procs stack and do not ignore armor. Heat procs do not stack and do not ignore armor. And again, as a bonus to compensate for that, they make the target flail around and be on fire, so it is a light crowd control effect. Heat is most effective crowd control when you apply it a lot of times, because it doesn't crowd control them for that long, but it's also more effective as damage when you apply a little bit at a time, because it does damage over time, but that doesn't stack. So the thing that heat is often the best for is as a supplementary element alongside corrosive, because you have cold and heat left. So if you have heat, that's great, put it alongside corrosive, you'll get some light crowd control, a little bit more damage over time, that's pretty nice. So there you go. And then cold has like a bit better damage bonuses and also gives you some different light crowd control. Our last niche useful element is radiation. So radiation is particularly good because it has bonuses against alloy armor, and alloyed armor units are really, really annoying. You want to kill those bombards, right? Well, this has 75% bonus damage against bombards, and not much else. You get reduced damage versus shields, and heavily reduced damage versus infested and fossilized infested, so that's not very good. You do get a little bonus against robotics, but meh. So that's mediocre. You get very good damage against a very high priority type of enemy, that being like bombards and stuff, but otherwise it's not a good all-around damage type. It is one of the worst all-around damage types that we've encountered so far. However, its proc is rather nice. So its proc is basically a friendly fire turn-off effect. So when you do a radiation proc on an enemy, we're going to need 2 for this. They can shoot allies. They identify allies as enemies, as well as enemies. So I've radiation proc that guy, and you might see in a sec that they'll start attacking each other. See, he's shooting that other heavy gunner because they have a radiation proc on. And radiation procs last for a while, 12 seconds. So if you drop some radiation procs in an area and then leave, the enemies will start fighting each other, which is pretty good if the enemies are really high level like these. So I'm going to radiation proc that guy and then leave, and kind of like hide back here, and as you can see, they're fighting each other. So it's really cool, it's a lot of fun. It's not that strong because they're not going to kill each other, but if there's a big group of enemies and you throw some radiation procs in, you will get like pretty decent like pseudo crowd control. So it can be very powerful in the right situation, and it couples with viral, which is a very good element. So before I said that you can kind of pick like corrosive and blast, radiation, viral, and gas and magnetic if you want to pick like a full set, do all your elements, and I would say radiation viral is the second best of those, so that's something that's good about it too. It's okay. So now we are into the generally underwhelming damage types, and this includes only our 2 remaining options, so we're almost there, everyone. The first generally underwhelming damage type is electricity, and electricity is the only basic element that has made it down this far, and I believe it is the worst overall basic element, but there's a kind of odd reason why. And the odd reason why is that it combines into 2 pretty good elements. So first of all, it combines into corrosive, so there's really no reason you shouldn't be using corrosive. If you have this and toxin at your disposal, just use corrosive instead. It's really good. So that's bad, because it's not corrosive and it could be. And then it also combines into radiation, which is not great, but better than this, so use that instead. Electricity gets bonuses against all machinery, so Corpus and Grineer machinery, and 50% bonus, which is pretty good. And it suffers a 50% bonus against alloy armor. That's a lot worse than a 50% positive bonus against machinery. It doesn't have any other bonuses or detriments, so I guess that's kind of good because it's like well-rounded or whatever. But it's not good at anything. You know, things being not bad is not going to cut the mustard here. We have some really good ones, so it's not really good at anything, and that makes it kind of bad. And its proc is okay. Its proc gets a B. It is a chain lightning effect. It does 50% of your weapon's base damage as electricity damage to the enemies nearby, and then it stuns them all for about 3 seconds. Now this gets a B because it is light crowd control, and you might be saying, well, Zandypants, Blast got an A. See, there goes the zap. But as you can see, it didn't zap that heavy gunner that was right next to it, and I died. Because it doesn't affect a very large area. And it also isn't very reliable. There are just like lots of finicky things. The reason electricity gets a B and Blast gets an A is because Blast is much more reliable, and Blast is also a better damage type, and Blast, most importantly, Blast opens enemies to ground finishers, whereas electricity, they're just standing there. It's much like the heat status effects control, so, and it's just like less reliable, but you can sometimes get multiple enemies, and it does a little damage, not more damage than heat. So that's bad. I would say that electricity and cold have the 2 like worst procs so far of the procs that we've talked about, but now we're going to get to the worst proc of them all. Magnetic. So, remember when I said that having like no negative bonuses is not going to cut the mustard? Well, magnetic. So, magnetic also does 50% less damage against alloy armor, which again is really bad. You do not want to be bad at killing the enemies that have alloy armor. That's not good. It does get a 75% bonus damage against shields and proto shields, so that's a lot. That's pretty big. That means basically any Corpus enemy you fight, for at least a good portion of their health, you get 75% bonus damage. That would seem like it would be good. But the magnetic status is called Disrupt, and it reduces the target's current and maximum shields by 75% for 4 seconds. So this is a lot like the viral status effect, but it only affects shields instead of health. This is good if you're only fighting against shielded dudes, but this is the only element out of all of the elements that we've talked about that is just utterly pointless if you are not fighting against Corpus. Like, out of all of the elements we've talked about so far, they almost always have a use when you are not fighting against like one faction. Like, radiation is better against Grineer, but it's like okay when you fight other factions, and the proc is good, right? This is the only status type, the only elemental type, and the only proc that is absolutely worthless unless you are fighting against Corpus, and for that reason I'm giving it the only C out of all these damage types. So again, it's not that it's bad against Corpus, it does literally nothing if you are not fighting Corpus. Again, like, it doesn't do like not things you want. It like literally doesn't do anything if you are not fighting against shields. Like, it has no damage bonuses. To be fair, not very many detriments, but still, there's that magnetic proc. As you can see, shields went way down. That's it. That's all it does. Only against enemies like this does it do that. And if I'm being nitpicky, one other thing that's bad about magnetic is that it doesn't last very long. Like, that shield reduction doesn't last a very long time. Very, very short amount of time. So that's magnetic, and magnetic sucks. It's not, if you somehow are only going to fight Corpus for a long time, then I guess it's good, kind of, but it just, like, cold alone is better overall, and electricity combines into elements that are better overall, and gas and magnetic is a really unfavorable damage spread. No, don't do this. So there you have it. That's it for my full review of all of the elemental damage types and their procs. Once again, I think that the sort of the big four are Corrosive and Blast, and then Cold and Toxin. And then Gas and Viral are pretty good, have good procs, good damage bonuses. Heat and Radiation are okay, they have nice light crowd control. Heat is a really good supplemental element. And then Electricity and Magnetic especially are just very limited and bad. Their applications are just very limited. It's not that they're so weak, again, nothing is below a C, but you shouldn't be ending up with those elements. Like, you should be building elements from the other categories, and then by the time you get to the generally underwhelming types, you'll already have used the elements that make up those damage types, and you will never have them. And that's the way it should be, because they're bad. So thanks very much for watching. If you have any further questions or recommendations for, like, good weapons to do a certain thing with or whatever, let me know in the description, the comments, and I'll take your questions as best I can. See y'all next time.